What was the worst physical pain you've been through? I got shot in the eye with an airsoft gun at about 350 FPS and I went blind in my left eye for a while. I developed traumatic glaucoma and the pressure from the glaucoma was indescribable. I could barely walk or speak. Edit. There's pics of my eye on my profile for any of you that wanna take a gander. Edit numero dos. Some context and some of all are skin. I was at an airsoft arena with eye protection and a face shield. Somehow the BB managed to hit me in the eye even with the eye pro. How? I wish I could tell ya. Theory is it bounced off my face shield and somehow went under the eye pro, but who knows. I'm not blind anymore, but I do have an implant that keeps the pressure down and I have a synthetic lens so I can see. I had costochondritis once after battling a sinus infection and bronchitis for about 2 straight weeks. It started coming on when I was at work, which, at the time, was at an arcade and I was in charge of a big attraction and telling people how it worked. Basically I'd go into the curtained off area with them before the ride started and tell them how to signal they wanted off the ride and such if things weren't okay. It started as this sharp pain in my sternum if I talked for far too long. I was about 6 hours into a 10-hour shift and was trying to shake it off because I wanted to finish it. Within 30 minutes I would walk in to give instructions and would have to kneel on the ground and hold my chest to get through it. I went home and went to urgent care and at first they almost sent me to the ER saying it sounded like a heart issue. However, my friend with me brought up my previous medical issues. I could hardly speak without being in intense pain, and told them I'd had to be put on an inhaler and such and asked if it could be related. I had never heard the word costochondritis before being diagnosed with it, but it hurt so bad. It's a lot like pleurisy, I'd say. The only difference being where the inflammation is, which is in the cartilage between your ribs and sternum. I then had to spend another several days only being able to whisper talk because my normal volume would make it hurt and alternating hot and cold compresses and not move around hardly at all. I ended up with pleurisy a few years later and it was eerily similar, but I was told where the difference lies. They both fucking hurt and make even lying down trying to breathe a nightmare. Just had this happen a few weeks ago. The stone was 5 millimeters. The night of the pain was so bad that I was throwing up all my stomach bile. Didn't sleep, and ended up going to the emergency room. They give you morphine for the pain, and after that first dose, the pain goes away so fast and you sleep like a baby. Then come a few CAT scans. Then you're prescribed painkillers. A week later I felt a sharp burning pain below my belly button, and a sudden urge to go pee. It was the damn stone. Completely agree. I was in post-pain trauma for 2 days after it went down the pipe. I really felt completely shaken, violated and emotionally destroyed. I remember in hospital, before painkillers kicked in, I opened my eyes for a second and there was a team of staff, doctors standing around me looking at me as if I was a zombie. There was real fear in their eyes, probably due to me growling like a mad dog from pain. Drink water. I broke an ankle into 4 pieces once, and while the actual break itself wasn't painful, I was totally calm and coherent to the point where people didn't believe I'd broken something. It started to hurt when the doc was setting and relocating the joint. For like 2 years afterwards I'd occasionally lose the ability to put pressure on that foot without excruciating pain. It would come and go in bouts of 10-15 minutes, and I'd be walking along just fine and then bam, pain and I couldn't put my foot down. Got stuck in the produce section of a grocery store once for a while cause I couldn't move. Pulmonary embolisms. Of course the warning signs were there. 4 months before I had went to the ER because I thought I had a blood clot in my leg. Doctor told me it was varicose veins and laid a guilt trip on me about calling in an ultrasound tech, so I went with his diagnosis and went home. Then one night I had such severe pain in my neck and chest I thought I was having a heart attack but roughed that out. Went to urgent care and they took chest x-rays and said I had walking pneumonia and wouldn't give me anything for pain. Slept upright in a recliner a few nights with whiskey and codeine and it finally passed. 2 months later I was laying mulch and my leg swelled up about 3 times its normal size. Went to the ER and got an ultrasound. Doctor came in and offered me fentanyl. Turns out I had a 5-inch long clot that had worked its way from my leg into my hip. Got a CAT scan of my chest and had clots in my lungs. Cherry on top was when they went in and did vascular surgery. My blood pressure dropped too low and they had to stop all pain medication and twilight anesthesia. Spent the last 20 minutes yelling in pain as they continued to try and break up the clot. I guess your body naturally lowers your blood pressure and heart rate when your blood cells are broken up as some kind of survival mechanism. Pain was severe and there wasn't anything they could do except finish. Moral of the story: trust your gut feeling and yes, wake up the on-call ultrasound tech because doctors aren't always right, and just because you're in your 30s doesn't mean something can't be severely wrong. I used to get hemorrhoids that would get so big that they would eventually burst and bleed for days. That was painful, and it was literally nothing compared to the recovery of the hemorrhoidectomy. Taking a shit after surgery on your asshole is like literal hell on earth. Fun fact: opiates cause constipation, so that's a super fun rope to balance on. Even though I took prescription stool softener to the point that they were the consistency of mud, they felt like I was passing jagged rock-hard glass. After every poop, I would very carefully wipe as best as I could, and then shakily get in the shower so I could fully clean myself to prevent infection. After I was clean, I would run a bath and try not to weep. The first week was so bad, I'd be starving and terrified to eat. After the first week, every shit hurt to the point where I could just grit my teeth and grunt through it. They didn't fully quit being painful for about 2 months. I had a growth removed from inside my abdomen and they cut open my butthole with an incision going essentially from my butthole up my crack 4-ish inches. I had a similar experience, but I didn't get opioids, just gabapentin, Tylenol and ibuprofen. It was absolute fucking hell. I still have PTSD type anxiety, nightmares, trauma from that recovery. I had stitches holding my butthole back together and had to pack the surgical wound for 3 months. I was in such a dark place during that time. I also had a drain coming out of my butt cheek which was stitched in place. I couldn't sit down or lay on my back or right side for months. I had a hemorrhoid burst while I was on the toilet once. It was one of those super inflamed and fiery ones that hurt 24/7 and sting with the wrath of 1,000 flaming wasps when you wipe. I guess I pushed just hard enough that it popped into the toilet. It looked like a murder scene took place in the toilet. At first I was super relieved since all that pressure was gone. The monster was finally slain. The fuck up was when I went to wipe. I had been using baby wipes for the 2 weeks that I had it as to not irritate it as much and draw it out from conventional toilet paper. I had gotten into a habit of just reaching behind me, grabbing a wipe and wiping without looking. Well, apparently someone in my household had placed a pack of Lysol wipes right next to the pack of baby wipes and I neglected to notice this. Wiping your freshly popped, bloody asshole pouch with cleaning chemicals is worse than the pain of the hemorrhoid itself. I agree. I've had a hemorrhoidectomy twice, for 18 removed total, and it's by far the worst pain of my life. U.can''t.get.comfortable. No matter what position. Since the pain is internal, I've had to use up vacation time at work because I could not leave the house. It felt like they shoved a cardboard paper towel tube up my ass, and I had to get them banded, so I felt every snap of the elastic as they went on. I distinctly remember the doctor saying, "Oh wow, this tool works way better than the last one." I'm certain that I need it again, despite adjusting diet, taking fiber supplements, and trying everything I can to take a normal shit. I know they're back, and I just can't bring myself to go do it again. I remember the first time discovering I had hemorrhoids too. I was on a work trip out of the country, and one had burst while I was dropping one at the hotel. The toilet was so blood red and I had no idea what was going on. Had dinners and trade shows and all that shit to attend as well, so for the week I was away I was panicking so much in the back of my mind. I'm a weak little coward who's lived a soft life, so the only excruciating pain I've been through was a 10-hour period of kidney stones. I had no idea what was going on when it started, so I thought an internal organ had burst and I was dying. I've never had something be so painful. For every single second I went through it. After about 9-10 hours I finally went to the hindsight, I thought about going an hour into it, but I kept talking myself out of it. 10/10ths would not recommend. Trying to poop after having a baby, with an almost third-degree internal tire. I'm fairly sure I ripped some stitches getting out of my car. She left the suture string hanging out and I didn't know. The day after I was discharged, it was like someone was ripping me in half from my ass. It wasn't the pushing that hurt. It was when everything retracts back up after going. Second most painful thing I have ever had was mano. My throat felt like razor blades and I couldn't even swallow water. These statements from someone who has had 2 babies and was impaled in the leg on a metal bar from a car frame. Lol. I had my gallbladder removed around 7 years ago. Before that I had gallstones getting stuck every now and then, each time worse than the last. It always woke me up in the middle of the night and there was nothing I could do to remedy the pain. I just laid down on the bathroom floor in a ball and waited it out. It felt like I imagined getting repeatedly stabbed would feel like. A couple of times the pain was so intense I threw up from it. It typically lasted a couple of hours and as soon as the stone had passed there was no more pain. It was bliss in a way, it just washed off me. When the inflamed gallbladder got removed I received a box with 3 stones the size of chestnuts. They say that kidney stones is the next step up in pain. I really hope I never have to experience that. Downhill mountain biker / snowboarder / skater here. Out of all my injuries somehow my broken wrist felt the worst. I almost puked on the way to the hospital from the pain. And when I got there they had to inject this huge ass needle right into the center of the fracture by kinda wiggling and forcing it through. Then this huge nurse came into the room and they had to reset the fracture by holding me down and pulling my arm with 2 other nurses. Doctors. I was still young and unfortunately didn't learn a single fuck that day. As a kid my dad beat me to a bloody pulp then threw me down the basement steps and threw down food and a cup so I could get water for the week. I was in the 3rd grade and was called into the office prior to my beating because I had marks and always slept in class. When they asked how I got the marks I stupidly said my dad. Well that was CPS and they told my dad that if I showed up with marks again at that school he would go to jail and lose everything. Well my dad pulled me from that school and took out his anger on me. Thanks CPS, they never did follow up, ever. I had a hysterectomy 2 months ago. Tried laparoscopic removal but my uterus was too big with fibroids so it was removed abdominally. The bladder sits on top of the uterus. Mine was bruised during surgery and the pain when I tried to pee for the first time after the catheter was removed was awful. It felt like being ripped apart. I had to use a catheter for 2 weeks to let my bladder heal. I wasn't given an overnight bag so I had to set an alarm to wake up in the wee hours to empty. It got too full once and some leaked out manually and that was almost as excruciating as the first time. My appendix burst when I was almost 4 and I had a C-section for my twins at 22. I'm familiar with abdominal discomfort. Recovery from the hysterectomy has been extremely difficult, both physically and mentally. I'm not sad that my uterus is gone, good riddance. I just feel completely beaten by the whole experience. I used to have really bad anemia, and once at work while on my period I had a really bad bout of it. I'd how else to describe it. This pain was insane. Like from my head to my toes everything was on fire. It was so bad that I started to black out, like spots in my vision. Back to normal, back to spots. Eventually the pain got so bad and my vision got so obstructed as I passed out, that I was convinced I was dying. As I fell to the floor, losing consciousness, completely blind, all I could think about was that animatics Nations of the World song, you know, United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama. And I just thought my life is ending, I'm literally about to die, and my last ever thought is going to be that goddamn song. Anyway, I woke up and threw up and felt a lot better. Migraine, just feels like I'm going to die but without any of the sympathy you get from actually being about to die. My friend had meningitis and nearly died. She now gets migraines and said the first time she got one she went to hospital as the pain was as bad as the time she had meningitis. I have given birth, had wisdom teeth out and passed gallstones. Migraines are always worse because the pain feels like it is literally in your brain and there is no way to get away from it. It literally hurts to think and you can't not think because all you can think of is pain. This isn't my worst ever pain but it's up there. Before I got braces whenever I was around 14 they had to take a mold of my teeth and the gel like shit that was on this metal thing, and whenever she put it on my lower teeth she fucked up the placement kinda and the metal scrapped onto my lower gums and cut into them. I am very quiet and so I literally sat there trying not to make a sound with my eyes starting to tear up for like a minute probably. It felt like an eternity, and whenever she went to pull it out, it took her another 30 seconds because it was nearly stuck, but it was covered in blood and the skin from my lower gums was cut pretty bad. Just the feeling of the cold metal scraping down cutting deep into the gum is a feeling I can't forget. My entire top 10 list of most painful moments of my life are probably all braces related. Fuck those things. And I didn't even go through particularly heavy procedures. Metal piercing your gums or scraping the insides of your cheeks or tongue repeatedly is the absolute fucking worst. The worst one I can recall was when something snapped in the back of my mouth and the sharp end of the wire of the braces was pressed into my gums with spring force, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was extremely lucky that my mom happened to know an orthodontist and she could cut the wire off about 20 minutes after the incident. The 20 most painful minutes of my life having that wire just apply constant pressure. It's a tie between the nurses pushing down hard over and over again on my lower stomach after giving birth and my doctor basically performing surgery on me with only giving my lidocaine shots when the birth control and my arm migrated. He cut me open about 1.52 inches with a scalpel and spent almost an hour trying to locate it and digging it out carelessly with a pair of tweezers. I still have pain where the scar is. Pretty sure the dude gave me nerve damage. So I hemorrhaged after giving birth and I had like 10 nurses squeezing my stomach over and over. They couldn't get it to stop so the doctor had to come in and shove her hand up to her arm inside of me and manually squeezed my uterus to stop the bleeding. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. They almost had to send me to another hospital to get a procedure where they insert a balloon inside of you to stop the bleeding. It was not fun. Hard choice, minus 28-day migraine, that only at the end they realized was actually viral meningitis, leaving me bedridden, chronically ill, with me, CFS for almost 3 years now. Yeah, 40+ hour induction for my premature baby who was sure he was not ready to come out, so had a C-section. With an anesthesiologist who didn't hook up my epidural. That wore off mid-surgery then the recovery from all that a fall between a semi and a loading dock, left leg first, got pulled out and the adrenaline was high so I kept working for 8 hours, broke my kneecap, tore both the meniscus, ACL, MCL, and PCL and bruised my femur and both shin bones but because government delays, I couldn't get surgery so my knee got fucked completely at 21 years old, couldn't even walk for 9 months. Middle finger on hand I used to brace myself falling backwards on my skateboard. Looked like I broke it in 3 places. Buddy of mine, no idea what he was doing because we were stupid kids, snapped it back into place because I didn't want my mom to take my board away, which she would have never done anyway. I can't believe I didn't pass out as I've never experienced anything as excruciating as that. And my finger is still slightly crooked to this day. Never gave up the board though. When I was a teenager I had an ear infection. The antibiotics I was prescribed weren't helping, but I was told to man up and give it a week. After a week, the pain was so bad I was banging my head against the wall in the middle of the night out of delirium. Parents woke up, saw my whole side of my head was swollen and took me to there they diagnosed me with a case of mastoiditis. infection of the mastoid bone that can come from an untreated ear infection. As treatment they inserted and proceeded to give me penicillin. That was the day I found out I was allergic to penicillin and went into anaphylactic shock. Last thing I remember before blacking out was my mom hovering over me asking why I looked like that. When I came to, I was in NICU and recovering, with frequent allotted doses. I forget how long I was there, but I believe it was nearly a week. To this day it is the worst pain I have ever experienced, and I've had a heart attack since too. Doesn't compare. Still have pain in that ear every now and then, and I'm so scared to get water or anything in that ear when swimming or showering. For 20 plus years I've been babying that ear lol. Surprisingly, healing post-tonsillectomy. I always thought it was supposed to be an easy surgery where you just chilled and ate ice cream for a week. Instead, it was 2 weeks of feeling like I was swallowing glass anytime I needed to eat, drink, or swallow. The pain was so bad, or once I hit the cauterized scab splitting open stage, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I hallucinated several times. The worst was probably when I was alone in my room, and felt the end of my bed compressed like someone had just sat down. I live alone, and my cat was asleep next to me. That happened twice the same night. Later, I woke up standing in the hallway. I have no memory of how I got there. I saw lights flashing from underneath the blanket on my bed, like it was draped over the headlights of car. I lost numerous chunks of time. The worst was when I was watching a movie in the early afternoon. The sun was out and I was sitting on my couch in the living room. I leaned forward to reach for the glass of water on the table in front of me. I closed my eyes a moment to blink, but when I opened my eyes it was nighttime and dark in my apartment. I was sitting up in bed with my hand outstretched in front of me. I must have lost 5 or 6 hours. I felt straight up haunted. Several other unpleasant things happened, but overall it was 2 weeks of misery. I had very large tonsils, so I am guessing my healing was difficult due to having a large surface area of flesh that got cauterized. I'm not going to pretend this touches what other people have dealt with, but for reference, I snapped my ulna, one of the 2 bones in the forearm, and had it cross over my radius and pop out the other side of my arm. I would gladly do that 10 times over having to endure that surgery again. I have had a child, but with an epidural. While that was quite an experience, the natural brain drugs make it worth it, and I decided I wanted to do it again while holding my newborn. That being said, I have 8 dental implants in my jaw. The dentist that was used was a family friend and his office was about 4 hours away. Due to a miscommunication, I was scheduled to show up for an appointment that I didn't really need to be at. Since I had made the drive, I figured I'd stay. This appointment turned out to be about shaping and filing the implants before they were fully installed into the also integrated inch-long screw holes they had surgically put into my jaw. Normally this happens on a model of the patient, but the dentist decided to do it on me. Due a 3-hour appointment where the implants were repeatedly and painfully inserted, filed, shaped, and then removed, filed, shaped, and reinserted countless times. The back of my shirt was soaked from sweat and tears, and my mouth tasted like metal and blood for the entire drive back home. My poor brother drove me and had to hear me sob in the back seat on the way out of the city. I didn't even leave with the new teeth. I had to wait for them to be stained. This was about 6 years ago, so I'm happy now, but holy hell. If my child inherits this oligodontia, I'll gladly pay to have her put to sleep for the full implants in one go.